Differences in pronunciation between the inner circle countries, speakers of English from the inner circle countries, and speakers of English from the outer circle countries are evident not only in the use of stress and rhythm patterns, but also in the use of certain speech sounds. In the outer circle countries, we see the speakers simplify the final consonant clusters. This leads to the loss of inflections on the verbs, the inflections that indicate the past tense, and the loss of plural s from the nouns. For example, left will be used in place of the word left. Similarly, instead of pick, the speakers from many outer and expanding circle countries may pronounce the word as pick instead of picked. Instead of climbed, they may say climb. And instead of bags, they will say bag. Instead of beds, they may say bed, so on and so forth. Some of these differences may have no consequences, may not even be noticeable. For example, left in place of left. But in some cases, especially in terms of loss of inflections on the verbs and nouns, which indicate the tense of the verb or the plurality of the noun, this can cause misunderstandings and sometimes even breakdown in communication. Another difference in the way speech sounds are used by native English speakers and non-native English speakers is in the use of voiced and unvoiced sounds. In English, there's something we call a voiced sound and an unvoiced sound. All vowels are voiced. In English, all vowels are voiced. Consonants can be voiced or unvoiced. Voiced consonants are caused by a certain kind of movement of the vocal cords. Unvoiced consonants are made just with air. You do not use your vocal cords. You just say the sound with a burst of air coming out of the mouth. For example, p, p, t, s, k, f, th. So when you say all these sounds, you have to bring out a burst of air from your mouth. The voiced consonants, on the other hand, are caused by the movement of the vocal cord. So go ahead, put your hand on the hollow of your neck and say one of these sounds. For example, p, p, k. So when you say these sounds, you will feel no vibration on your neck in the vocal cords. But when you pronounce the voiced consonants, for example, b, d, g, z, v, d, you will feel this vibration in the vocal cords if you place your hand on the hollow on your neck. So the sounds which you make with the burst of air are called unvoiced consonants, and the consonants, the sounds that you make, consonant sounds that you make without this burst of air, with the movement of the vocal cords, they are called voiced consonants. And voiced consonants, when you say voiced consonants, in a way your voice is turned on, your vocal cords are on. The non-native speakers of English do not really make this distinction. So they would pronounce the p sound without the aspiration, and in that case it will sound more like b. And therefore people will not be able to make a distinction between whether a person is saying pin or bin. Pin, bin. So when you pronounce an unvoiced sound as a voiced sound, it can cause a lot of difficulty in comprehension to the native English speakers. A native English speaker will be confused whether you're saying bin or pin, because to him both will sound the same as bin without the aspiration. So the non-native speakers of English do not make this distinction. Another sound that is difficult or is completely overlooked by the speakers of English from the outer and expanding circle countries is the distinction between clear and dark la sound. In the IPA, you do not see any distinction between the dark and light la sound. The light la normally comes at the beginning of the words or before consonant sounds, as in like, love, please, English. When you pronounce the la sound as a light sound, what you do is you put your tongue on this gum ridge immediately just behind your front upper teeth. So, like, love, please, English. But the dark la sound is pronounced, when you pronounce this or you produce this dark la sound, the tongue touches nowhere. So you sort of leave your tongue loose in the mouth, somewhere at the back of the mouth. And the dark la sound comes normally at the end of words or before vowel sounds. For example, feel, peel, pull, full, sail. So non-native English speakers from expanding and outer circle countries do not make any distinction between the dark and the light la sound. For example, Russian speakers of English pronounce the dark la sound even at the beginning of the word. So they would say like, love, instead of like, love. Another difference in the sounds produced by the native English speakers and non-native English speakers is in ra and la sound. In some varieties of English, there's no distinction made between the ra sound and the la sound. For example, Chinese. So the Chinese will say late when they want to say rate. They will say, when they say feeling, it may sound like fearing. And when they say cutter, it may sound like cuddle to a native English speaker, because they do not make any distinction between the ra sound and the la sound. Another distinctive feature of pronunciation of the outer circle and expanding circle speakers of English is the insertion of a vowel in S clusters. Normally in S clusters, but in other consonant clusters as well. So the sound is simplified by the insertion of a neutral vowel between the two consonants. The consonant cluster is then pronounced with an initial vowel. Although there is no vowel, it's a consonant cluster at the beginning of a word. But when you insert a vowel sound at the beginning of the word, instead of the consonant cluster sound, the word will start with the vowel sound. And the cluster is no more initial. The initial sound of the cluster is naturally lost. For example, the insertion of a vowel sound in a consonant cluster, the word sport, you may have heard people pronouncing it as support, because they insert a vowel between the sa and the pa sound, support. Similarly, the word school, people often insert a vowel at the beginning of the initial consonant cluster. So before sa sound, they will insert a vowel and pronounce school as iskool. The same goes for slow. The people will insert from expanding and outer circle countries, India and Pakistan especially. The Urdu and Hindi speakers particularly make this mistake, shall I say, and they insert a vowel sound between sa and la sound in the word slow as well. So, slow will be pronounced as silo, by the expanding and outer circle, some expanding and outer circle variety speakers of English. So, because of all these distinctive features of pronunciation of the English used by the speakers in the outer and expanding circle countries, we see a lot of variation between variation within the Englishes spoken in the outer expanding circle countries, and differences between the inner circle English and the outer circle English.